Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today I'm just doing a game review on What Remains of Edith Finch. Now I don't do an awful lot of game reviews, although it's definitely something I'd kind of like to do, but there's a couple of reasons why I felt compelled to make a review of this game, even though it has taken me since last October to do so. The first of these is that it's a relatively short game, so there's not too much to go on about in a review setting. The second is that I have really had an emotional connection with this game, and I don't always get that kind of feeling, really. So a lot of the times when I finish a game, I'm like, it's a shame that that's over. But with this particular game, when I finished it, I was like, whoa. So the first thing for me to clarify in a game review is that I hate to over or undersell things, especially video games, music, TV shows. So I'm going to try and avoid doing that, and I'm also going to try and give away as little as possible about the game, because mystery is the entirety of it. So I installed this game on Game Pass, and I thought it would be some kind of dodgy horror game that I could whore out for some easy achievements. And the game turned out to be a pretty dark story-based game that really did sucker me in. The first time I tried the game, I quit relatively quickly due to it not popping 2 achievements. Since I was literally there for the achievements, it didn't really seem much point continuing with it if it wasn't giving me them. But when I gave it a second go, I realised I'd done one of them incorrectly, and the other one was actually bugged. So the achievement when you're catching the rabbits, that is actually bugged. So, might have to do that a couple of goes, but it's relatively simple, really, once you got the hang of it. If you can do it once, you can do it again. But I am very glad that I gave it a second go. So by the evening of my second attempt on the game, I was kind of casually interested in where the game was going. I was interested enough to think it was worth me continuing to try and get the rest of the achievements throughout the game. By the end of the next evening, I was fully invested in where this thing was going. The first thing that I liked about this game was the fact that I had absolutely no idea where it was going at any stage. I couldn't even picture, what might happen next. I was completely, no idea. And the further you go through the game, the harder it is to know what to expect next, because you've been through all these stories that are just so unique and different from each other. Like, the studio went out of their way to make all of the stories as different as possible, and in terms of setting, in terms of theme, in terms of what happens to each of the family members that you're sort of flashing back through. And it really is just very interesting. It starts off kind of weird because the first story is very weird. But if you power through that, you get some very interesting sort of, as I say, very disparate stories throughout the game, which kind of did, as I say, sucker me in as I went on. I was kind of like, oh, I kind of want to see what they've come up with next, because each of these stories are so unique. The stories in this game certainly came from a mind, or a number of minds, that think a lot further outside of the box than my creative brain can. Kind of hard to explain my point here without giving much of the story away, because I don't really want to get into details about the stories or anything, because then the mystery would be gone. And as I say, mystery is really rather important in this game. But what I can say is that there was a mild curiosity at every stage about what was going to happen next, up until probably about halfway through the game, where I was kind of like, now I need to know what happens next. It's kind of like I was mildly interested, and then all of a sudden everything clicked into place, and I was like, yeah, I'm invested in this. I need to know what's going on next. And then I can safely say that by the end of the game, it was one of the most emotional endings I've ever had. I was floored by it. Seriously, when I downloaded What Remains of Edith Finch, because I thought it had a funny name and it would be some easy achievements, I didn't expect to be sat there in my chair. I mean, let me just paint the picture. You literally at the closing sort of scene of the game, and it just dawned on me what was going to happen. And I'll get more into that in a second. It just dawned on me what was going to happen, and I was like, oh my god. And the game finished, and I was just sat there for a couple of minutes like, Finch, that was a pretty good game. There's not a lot of times I can say that I've played a game where the ending is just hit me like a ton of bricks. I guess I haven't played a lot of games in this kind of style, but it really was just a hard emotional ending. I was kind of like, whoa, heavy. So I shot and edited this whole video, and even went as far as to upload it to YouTube, and then realised that I hadn't actually talked about the scenery of the game, which is a massive part of what made it appeal to me, really. One of the things I like most about franchises such as Fallout and Borderlands is that kind of like dystopian, like everything's just a mess aesthetic with just crap all over the place. I really like that. I can honestly say that I've went on Fallout 4 many times just to wander about, just because I want to see more of the world. And Edith Finch very much has a very interesting setting. It's set in a house, which is kind of like something out of a series of unfortunate events. It's just a big tower with loads of little bits sort of stuck on it, and like one of the bedrooms is just a boat that's kind of like jammed in there and stuff. And you know, you go into this house, you have to break into the house. Yeah, you sneak in through like a hole in the garage or something, and you know you go through this house. There's just crap everywhere, and it's this very fascinating kind of like almost old timey, but at the same time still quite modern house. With you know just books all over the place and just general sort of like you know it's just a massive messy house, and it looks really cool. A lot of effort has gone into designing the house, etc. And then once you're going between all of the stories, you have to go through all the different routes through the house to get to people's other rooms, like secret passages and like hidden doors and stuff like that. And it just enhances the game a little bit more, because I can honestly say I've never played a game in a setting quite like the house in Edith Finch. Like I say, a lot of effort has gone into designing it, and it looks really good. It really appeals to a guy like me that for some reason just has a real fondness for that kind of messy aesthetic and like old houses and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another thing that I definitely needed to talk about in this. And now I'm going to get into a slightly more spoilery section of the review before I go to my ultimate sort of final thoughts on it. So from the name What Remains of Edith Finch, we come to realise that the protagonist who is telling the story is going to die at some stage as soon as we learn that she is Edith Finch. When I later found out that, spoiler, she is 22 weeks pregnant, I started thinking like, okay, so how are they going to kill her off? Like, this game is pretty dark, but killing off a pregnant woman, that's another level, right? I'll say no more on the topic. Just keep that in mind when you're playing. From playing as a little girl who dreams about eating pregnant birds as a cat and eating pregnant bunnies as an owl, to playing as a wind-up frog bath toy, I can honestly say that this game gave me an awful lot of experiences I never expected to have. And in fact, I'd actually go a step further than that and say a number of experiences I never would have thought I would have playing a video game. The game is relatively short, easy achievements, and it's free on Game Pass, so you're really sacrificing nothing to play it as long as you have Game Pass and room on your console. So I hope this has been an entertaining video in informing you about the game. I hope that you do check it out. And this is what remains of my What Remains of Edith Finch game review, and that is to say, thank you for watching and goodbye.